Third Spark, and today I am doing an Authority Magazine interview with Professor Stephen G. Post. Professor Post is one of the world's leading scholars on altruism, love, compassion, and the science of giving. He's a best-selling author, a professor of preventive medicine, and founder of the Institute for Research on Pure Unlimited Love. I am so happy to have you here with me today, Dr. Post. Please share with me all these amazing things that you've done. I can't wait to have this conversation with you.
Well, thanks, Sean. It's nice to meet you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So tell me a
Well,
little bit about how you got started in this field.
that's a long sort of an origin story. They can
All right,
be
well, give me the high
diverse.
levels of it.
Well, I more or less got started in this area of interest when I was a high school kid in New Hampshire at a place called St. Paul's School, and I had a wonderful world religions teacher, and we looked at all the great uh, traditions of the world, and that became my peripatetic style. I was wandering around the pathways in the woods around Turkey Pond and
Mm,
so forth, and I was engaged with all of these materials, and they meant a lot to me. And I didn't really pursue the spiritualities uh, until a little later in my life, because in college I was a biologist and even went out to the West Coast for a while, believe it or not, Reed College in Portland, Oregon,
mm,
um, and enjoyed that. And then I came back and worked in pediatric endocrinology and in immunology for a little while at Penn. Um, I'm not an MD, but I'm a decent intuitive scientist. Um, but then I decided that I wasn't going to go in that direction anymore, so I went off to the University of Chicago in psychology and in the divinity school.
mm,
And so I was able to study with all kinds of wonderful, uh, great historians of religions of all kinds. Mircea Eliade, when he was writing his book on shamanism, Joseph Campbell would be there half the year.
mm.
So it's just a very exciting place to be. And then I worked in psychology with Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. It's an interesting name, hard to say. But it gets easy. It rolls off my tongue now. But he wrote a book called Flow at that time, and that became a big international bestseller. So now everybody talks about being in the flow, whether you're Michael Jordan or
Mm.
whomever you might be, where you lose sense of time and place, and you're totally immersed and engulfed in your creative activity and how healthy that can be. So that was that period of my life, and then I went on to Ann Arbor, Michigan. I went to Fordham for a few years, and then they got me to go to Cleveland, which I never thought I'd love so much, but I did. Cleveland is a wonderful city. It's got everything. And we grew up. The kids grew up in Shaker Heights, Ohio. My daughter and my son.
Mm.
They're now adults and off in their worlds. And then about 17 years ago, Stony Brook University Renaissance School of Medicine, the only medical school named after a big hedge fund that I'm aware of. Uh, they gave me an offer that I couldn't refuse, and I've had a lot of fun here and built a lot of programs, and it's been great. So that's sort of my quick journey, at least an external level.
So tell me about your books. You've had three, four books that you've.
Well, in different areas, I
Mm.
think some of them have been a little more academic than I think is necessary. I mean, when you write an academic book, you're happy if 100 people read it.
Mm.
Um, but in 2006, I entered the world of popular writing, and that was very good for me. I grew up a lot. I had some great influences. The first book, Why Good Things Happen to Good People,
Hmm.
how to live a longer, healthier, happier life by the simple act of giving, I had a with author on that named Jill Nymark,
Mm,
who's a very successful popular science writer.
mm,
And she has a wonderful knack with words. They tend to jump off the page. And so that book did pretty well, got on some good lists, and I just continued on with those kinds of themes about how giving is beneficial to the giver, which is something that we all, I think, know at a certain level. Uh, and of course, also about that time, I was writing on Alzheimer's disease because that's been a passion of mine since my grandmother,
mm.
um, who passed away of probable Alzheimer's disease when I was a young adult. Uh, and uh, and so I spent about 30 years crisscrossing the country with various organizations and programs and doing ethics consultations,
Mm.
uh, and that worked out very well. So I'd written a book called The Moral Challenge of Alzheimer's Disease, which came out in 1995, and the British Medical Journal announced that it was one of the classics of the 20th century.
Wow.
Slight overstatement, but the Brits, you got to take what you can get,
Absolutely.
and and so that was nice. It's been very widely cited, and I didn't write any more books on dementia and Alzheimer's until several years ago, and that's when I wrote what I think is my most meaningful book in a lot of ways, called Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People.
Hmm.
Uh, how caregivers can meet the challenges of Alzheimer's disease.
All right, I need a copy of this book.
So I did this with Hopkins. So I can send you a copy if you give me your
No, I
address.
can pick one up, but I mean, I'm living this right now with
Yeah,
my mother,
okay.
so I definitely need a copy of this book.
Oh, good,
I'd love
good.
to
Yeah,
hear
yeah.
about it. So tell me more about it.
Well, it did well. It got an award with Hopkins Press, and
Mm,
when I do medical stuff, I like to publish with Hopkins because it's kind of the creme de la creme of the medical venues.
mhm,
Uh, but the title, first of all, is Dignity for Deeply Forgetful People. I have sworn off over the years the word dementia
mm,
because it's so much like the word retard.
mm.
It's an entirely negative term.
Right, there's a stigma. Sure.
Yeah, and we don't run around referring to people as retarded. We
Hmm.
refer to them as differently abled and neurodiverse and so
Right.
forth, etc. So I thought deeply forgetful
Mm,
worked better for me because it was more of a term that made them continuous with our own experiences. We all have our moments. We forget a name,
mhm,
we forget where we parked our car. Maybe we even forget if we drove to work today. That's a little more serious.
mm,
But uh, I actually did that once. I could not find my car, and I asked a medical student behind the medical school here if she had any idea where I parked my car. And she said no, and she laughed. And I said, "Do you have any idea if I drove my car to work today?" And then she just cracked up. But yeah, so dignity for deeply forgetful people, because we are all at moments deeply forgetful,
mm,
not necessarily in the a protracted sense that you would note in someone with a progressive dementia, for example, but it's a more inclusive term.
mm,
And happily, it's been influential because um, due to my work primarily, the American Psychiatric Association has deleted the word dementia
hmm.
from its diagnostic and statistic manual. The
Wow.
DS, there was the
Mm,
DSM-3 and the DSM-4. Now there's the DSM-5. And I was writing a lot of things about how deep forgetfulness is a more mystical, but
mm,
also much more respectful term. And that eventually penetrated a bit. I can send you a few articles about that.
mm,
And so now DSM-5 doesn't use the word dementia. It talks about neurocognitive impairment
Mhm.
and then even um, minor uh, neurocognitive impairment. But it's much more respectful, and I think it's an improvement. We also did a Gallup study. We had a big grant to do a national survey of primary caregivers uh, who were caring for individuals with dementia. In this particular case, of the Alzheimer's origin, because all these different illnesses cause
Right,
dementia, which is really a syndrome.
right.
And with many, 100 years ago, neurosyphilis was the major cause of dementia.
Mm, mm,
That's why the Tuskegee experiment was done, was completely unethical. But
mm,
they were CDC people who were interested in following the progression of neurosyphilis in Black males.
mm.
Horrific idea, but that's what they did. And it became particularly horrific when they finally got penicillin available in about 1940, and they kept those gentlemen from having access to it. But that
Wow.
was all about understanding the various stages of a certain form of dementia. So, what was I saying there? I think that basically, when you use the word dementia clinically, it brings up all kinds of very adverse metaphors. So I hear people, and I describe this in the book, talking about even a very loved one as being gone, a husk,
Mhm.
shell, and so forth.
Right.
And I had no idea whether the idea of deeply forgetful people was catching on around the country. I thought
Mm,
maybe it was. So 3 years ago, I did a major survey of adult Americans, primary caregivers focused, and there was a way that Gallup could do that. Um, uh, and we asked them a lot of different things. Number one, what do you think of referring to individuals as deeply forgetful people? And that was very much popular, I found out.
mhm.
There are a lot of people who are using that now because they don't want to refer to their loved ones as demented.
Right.
And by the way, sometimes our favorite politicians refer to their adversaries as, oh, demented. They're just demented. I don't know if I like that. I don't like that at all, but it does happen. Uh, and so more people are using the term deeply forgetful now than was the case. And
That's a great reframe, I have to say. Personally,
yeah,
me as being
well,
a caregiver of my mother who is suffering from dementia,
oh,
I like that you're bringing that about as a conversation piece in our society because neurodegenerative disease by 2030, more women will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's than breast cancer. So this is a
yes,
really important thing
it is.
to
And
be
and
aware of.
dementia is so derogatory. I can
Hmm.
hardly even begin to speak of it. And
Hmm.
I've given major lectures around the world, had conferences around the world on why we need to drop that word, and it's happening. So I'm glad of it. But it still gets used, don't get me wrong. I mean, life doesn't change in a day.
Sure.
But although today's been pretty interesting, I think that um, we also we the main focus of the study, I can send you this paper which appeared in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, was on what I called and originally termed unexpected lucidity.
Hmm.
Because when you are around people and you're a primary caregiver,
Hmm.
you recognize sometimes it's sporadic,
Hmm.
but sometimes it's stimulated by music, the music and memory thing.
Hmm. The limbic system, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. It's music is very important because there's a great website called Music and Memory that was founded here on Long Island, and they put out a very, very successful documentary. I'll just show that to you, called Alive Inside.
Oh, okay.
It won all the awards at Sundance,
Hmm.
Audience Award for Best Documentary. And the person who's the genius behind it uh, is Dan Cohen,
Mm,
who's a social worker, and he just had a feeling that this was his calling. So when I got here from Cleveland, I met with Dan and we talked, and I even got him down to Philadelphia to the Templeton Foundation. I was on the board at the time, and he was able to present to them. So I was doing some interesting hobnobbing and a little bit of fundraising for it. But this is a hugely successful video. And if you Google music and memory and then Henry's a kind of a rock star
mm,
of this culture. And he's got his head down and he's not conversant. But then somebody plays Cab Calloway.
mm,
This is an African American fellow who's quite senior now. And he just lightens up
mm,
and he begins to sing and does beautiful things. And then he's actually conversant for at least 3 or 4 minutes after that intervention. So now, in more than half of the states in the US, um, music and memory is a funded operation. That is to say that people who are diagnosed with dementia, typically of the Alzheimer's origin,
mhm.
they actually, if they need it, they get a free uh, iPad
Wow,
or
that's
iPod. Yeah, I'm sorry, iPod. I don't do these things.
mm-hmm.
Um, although Jobs slept on my floor at Reed College, just FYI, but I'm okay. And we read the autobiography of a yogi. Uh, but so I think this is really important, and I'm convinced that there's more there in a person who's deeply forgetful than meets the eye. And the thing about the word dementia that I don't like is that it kind of keeps you from wanting to notice what's still there. So there are a lot of people who have been very creative musically, artistically. We have the Unforgettables Choir in New York,
Mm,
started at NYU, and it's caregivers, care providers, and individuals who are deeply forgetful. And they rehearse. They have to pick familiar music that resonates with the individual from earlier in life.
mm-hmm.
And all these individuals, with a few exceptions, will begin to chime in. They'll sing a whole line, maybe a whole verse, and it's beautiful. They get emotionally stimulated.
Mm,
They connect better with their loved ones, and they do a big public concert monthly at St. Peter's Lutheran Church, which I think is on Lexington and 50th Street.
mm-hmm.
So those kinds of things are great. And in Brooklyn, there's the Alzheimer's Poets. So what they do is I was on the board of that organization. So it's a it's a wonderful setting. You can have about 40 or 50 people with deeply forgetful conditions
Mm-hmm.
come into this nice old building, and they have their caregivers with them. They'll sit down, and they're not conversant much in the least. However, once these Alzheimer's poets get started,
Mm,
they bring them into themselves. So they'll use poetry that's familiar to a particular generational cohort, the road less traveled, or
mm-hmm.
stopping by, something along those lines. And we've had done studies on this and published them in the journal Dementia. Um, about 70 or 80% of people will surprise you and they'll chime in. They don't all
Fascinating.
chime in, but a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them do. And right here on the Stony Brook campus, we have a very significant nursing home, quote unquote, for vets, and a whole unit there is for vets with Alzheimer's disease
Mm,
and some other conditions of dementia as well. And so they all have in common that experience with the Army or the Navy or whatever it might be. So in a recreation room, uh, we uh, we had a big video, and it played music and scenes from World War II,
mm,
and played music. It's a grand old flag over there,
mm.
and so forth. And a lot of these people, America, they would stand up. I would say 90% in that
Wow.
study they would stand up and they would at least chime in for a line or two, but then they might drift away. But many more than half of them were actually able to stand up, get animated, salute the flag, if you will, and they would sing a whole verse, and it was a beautiful thing to see. And the family members really appreciated it. Because, now, so my cynical philosophical friends, I guess by definition, some people think of me as a philosopher.
Mm.
Um, I'm actually much more than that, but my philosophical friends say this is so trivial because that individual with quote unquote dementia, they may come around for a few minutes, they may kind of come into themselves, but it's fleeting.
Right.
It's fleeting, and so it's not like they really recovered their agency. There's a nice philosophical term which I don't
Ah,
like either. Um, and yet the caregivers are so inspired
right.
because
It brings joy. It brings
it's
hope. Yeah.
immense joy. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we found out that for 90%,
Mm.
90%, no less, 90% of caregivers, I'll send you this article, they found this inspirational and hopeful. That's the word.
That's right.
So they weren't just caring for someone who was, in most respects, dead and gone,
Mm.
but and it really completely reversed their attitude. So they began to notice some of the details, some of the expressions, and that's a very powerful part of my book, and that's what dignity is really about. So it's having a readiness to note, to notice. That's a word that Larry Dossey uses. To notice the identity and the meaning in these individuals' lives. I talk about a guy who I knew in Cleveland who would come into the Foley Elder Healthcare Center at the Cleveland Clinic, and he was quote unquote pretty far gone. But when he drew, his drawings were chaotic,
Mm.
and if I asked him questions, he couldn't respond. And but I never gave up with him. So I one morning asked him again, "Hey Jim, what are those two lines?" Because in the middle of this big piece of paper on a pad, it would be crazy, but he would have two lines, parallel lines.
Mhm.
And I would say, Jim, what is that? He could never respond. But then one morning he told me, he said, that's a map for my daughter to find her way to my house, unquote.
Wow.
So that's what I mean by unexpected lucidity.
Right.
And how common is it? It's quite common.
Hmm.
And it's very meaningful because, caregivers, I don't need to tell you this, but they have higher depression rates on average. And many of them are women.
Yep. That's right.
Um, and it has to be taken very seriously. I think that one of my ambitions in the next several years is to really do something with these findings to prepare caregivers, primary caregivers,
Mhm.
to notice and appreciate more of the underlying identity that remains. So one of the things I've made a distinction between it's original. There's linear reasoning,
Mhm.
like means, ends, rationality. I've got to get out to my car if I can remember where the hell it's parked. But and I got to start the engine and drive home. So that's means, ends, rationality. It's linear, but it's not really that important, I don't think. And I argue that in the book because what's really important is symbolic rationality.
Hmm.
I give all these cases. Um, I mean, one of my friends, David Keck, his mother, Janet Keck, uh, had Alzheimer's disease. Uh, his father was Leander Keck, probably the most famous New Testament exegete at Yale Divinity School ever. David wrote a beautiful book about this. That's why I can talk about it. And so, his mother was really lost. She couldn't go out around Prospect Street in New Haven. She couldn't do much of anything. She couldn't converse. But when she went to this Yale Divinity School chapel on a Sunday morning, and she heard these hymns that she'd been familiar with since her childhood, and where she uh, chimed in on prayers that she knew since she was just a little girl. And they also had some stained glass windows, of course, not too many because it's Protestant, but so be it. Uh, but she would really get uplifted. And then afterwards, all her friends would gather around her and they were so surprised because she could actually respond coherently
Hmm.
to some of their comments and questions. And so in my book, I also talk a lot about how to talk with someone with dementia. How do you talk with someone with dementia? You don't ever ask open-ended questions. Hey, what would you like for breakfast?
Right. Right.
Because you put them on the spot.
Right.
I mean, they get nervous. But if you say, would you like post toasties or scrambled
Yogurt with
eggs?
blueberries. That's what I
Yeah,
offer
yeah,
my mother every morning. Yogurt with blueberries? Yes.
yeah, that's the way to do it.
Yes.
Good job. And so one of my colleagues at Case Western wrote a whole book about communication techniques
Hmm.
with people who have dementia, and it's very instructive. So I believe that we need to help caregivers see the continuity of self-identity, even when it's opaque. It's admittedly opaque. And sometimes it has to be stimulated, and sometimes it's just totally spontaneous. That's what we found out in our study. Um, but they need to notice that, and they need to learn how to talk in an inclusive fashion. And I think if we could ever get to that point, also I use the word deeply forgetful, it would be a little better world for folks with dementia.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful reframe. I'm really grateful that you shared it with me personally. And I'm also really grateful that it's part of this interview because I think it's going to help a lot of people
Mhm.
that read this and see it. Do you
Yeah.
want to tell me a little bit about giving and the power of giving? I know it's such a
Yeah.
huge part of who you are and what you teach and
Well, I think everybody needs to have a calling that draws upon their capacity for kind giving.
mm,
Um, they will be happier and healthier and live a longer life on average. And we've done all those studies, published them in major medical journals left and right. And so nobody thinks it's crazy anymore. Although when I was at Case in the med school, one early morning in June, I got a fax from one of my great friends and mentors, the investor, Sir John Templeton
hmm
of the Templeton Funds. And he did not like emailing. He was maybe too old for it. He was about 90 then. But he loved faxing. He thought the fax was the greatest thing ever invented. So, sometimes he would fax me at least several times a day, if not more. And I got a fax from him. Stephen, we need to start an institute to study the greatest asset in human experience, which is love. And I faxed back, Sir John, what should we call this? And he, of course, responded, we're not just talking about human love. I have this quoted in a book. We're talking about the love that made humans. So they called him the Tennessee mystic because he was very one mind mysticism. He was kind of transcendental. And so he faxed back, we'll call the Institute for Research on Unlimited Love. And I faxed back because at that time I had a NIH grant on Alzheimer's genetics, um, which I published a lot on in JAMA and elsewhere, written books about it. But I thought for a minute, what are my colleagues going to think about this?
mm,
I mean, it was interesting. So I faxed back Sir John. Maybe we should call it the Institute for the Study of Creative Altruism, because altruism is a very dry social sciencey term. Evolutionary biologists talk about in-group and out-group altruism. It's okay. But oh, Sir John facts back. No, I think pure unlimited love up to $8.9 million. And I faxed back to Sir John. Sir John, and also I'm basically, I'm known as a scholar in world religions and psychology. So I was very confident with that new language. I said, Sir John, this wording jumps right off the page.
Mm.
And then I had the money in the bank. And the Institute has always been a nonprofit 501c3. It's now I've never let it become a part of a university because universities would dumb it down. They wouldn't get the spiritual creativity of this.
So what does the Institute offer as far as for you, for others? What is it? What's the meaning behind it?
Well, it's got a nice website,
Mm.
unlimitedloveinstitute.org. But we funded, probably 70 significant uh, research projects on love and giving and so forth. And that was now going back to the year 2000.
Mm.
Um, Most of the stuff on how to raise kind children, we funded with the Fetzer Institute. And that's now become a huge industry. It's in the literary world, bestsellers galore. So, we've been very careful to pick out themes that are of full importance to the quality of people's lives. So the first chapter in this book, Pure Unlimited Love,
Mm.
Science and the Seven Paths to Inner Peace. Notice it's not happiness.
Mm.
I don't like books on happiness.
Mm.
Sorry. But the word happiness, it's been so overused. I like Marty Seligman's stuff. He and I are good buddies, and he's got a deep definition of happiness. It involves some hedonic elements. It's nice to have a decent roof over your head and some food, I guess, but not too much. It can spoil you. But then you want to have that flow. And Csikszentmihalyi was a big figure in the founding of positive psychology. Because when Virginia Woolf was depressed and she was writing A Room of One's Own, she was in flow and she got out of that depression. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what happens with people.
Mm.
And then finally, there's this notion of the Greek notion of happiness as eudaimonism. Happiness over the course of a lifetime. So you're sort of getting on in years and you look back and you believe that your life was meaningful in certain ways. It was a fulfilled life over the course of a lifetime. And I think that's important too. So Seligman has all those things. But a lot of people like this, I won't even mention his name, this second-rate sociologist at Harvard, he just says the only kind of happiness that means anything is hedonic.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a son
I do.
and you love your son.
Mm-hmm.
And from a flow point of view, I have two kids. From a flow point of view, you get a lot of happiness from having kids. It's not every moment, not consistently, because they can also
Right.
be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But even when you're looking over a crib and it's quiet, things have calmed down, you can feel almost mystically attuned and joyful, hopefully. Okay, emphasis, hopefully.
Yes.
And then, now that you're a little older and you're looking back, um, maybe uh, you just think to yourself, there are a lot of meaningful things that I did in my life, and having a child was one of them.
Mm.
And so that's really important, I believe, for people who are able to engage in it. Not everybody can, and some people are called in different directions, but it's always been meaningful for me. I mean, my kids are 30 and 40 now, so they're a little older. But I would say that that's eudaimonism. It's great to be able to get a good slice of pizza, but that's not the whole story. And so this guy at Harvard, I won't give you his name because it'd be insulting and I wouldn't want it to appear. But he said the only kind of uh, happiness there is in life is hedonic, materialistic happiness. And so therefore, you shouldn't have kids. He actually wrote that.
Mm.
Um, and it became a very popular phrase. It caught on in advertisements on television. Um, you really shouldn't have kids because they're not going to make you happier. Not in the obvious hedonic sense. I mean, suddenly you can't just go out to any restaurant you want
Mhm.
any time of day. You can't necessarily sleep through the night.
Mhm.
Um, Life is not just easy, but still, it's beautiful. And I would say that that there are so many false notions of happiness around, and people come out with a book on happiness every day. I don't want to see them anymore. I don't read them anymore. Um, so I like inner peace. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who I've known for many years, wrote a really beautiful foreword. And he uses inner peace because when you think about it, you probably do meditation,
Mhm.
mindfulness, you do all
Mhm.
those things. I do that in the morning too. I get up early, about 5. And what I'm looking for is inner peace. I don't think you can really look for happiness. I think you can look for inner peace. And then as a kind of byproduct,
Mhm.
you'll be happier.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people would agree with that. His Holiness agrees with that. Um, so he wrote a beautiful foreword to this, and I owe him a lot. He's getting older now. He's 91,
Mhm.
and he's not doing too many forwards at all. But this may be his last one. At least that's what he said. But I'm convinced that we really need pure unlimited love. And the world has become so divided and so acrimonious and so ultra politicized. It's not healthy. People have forgotten how to laugh. So I have a definition of love. I'm going to do this quickly. My definition of love, which I take from a psychiatrist at the University of Chicago, Harry Stack Sullivan, when the well-being and the security of another is as real or meaningful to you as your own,
Mm.
and sometimes more so, like your son to
Mhm.
you, you love that person. And I think that works. It works in sitting down at coffee at Starbucks with an old friend who's had some hard times.
Mhm.
It works when I'm talking with patients here in the clinical settings. I just think you want to, this is what Dame Cicely Saunders called dignity therapy. She founded the hospice movement. She was a close friend. She got in the Templeton Prize, first one to receive it. And she came over for a conference we did at MIT in October of 1999 on empathy and altruism and agape. And she had started St. Christopher's Hospice in London. She came all the way over and she gave the dinner speech. And I was sitting there with Sir John Templeton. And she said, I still get up. I'm 82 years old. I still get up every morning and I go into St. Christopher's and I change bedpans
Mm.
because I used to be a nurse before I became a doctor. I only became a doctor because they didn't take hospice seriously unless I became something more than a nurse.
Mm.
That's what she said. And she said, then I sit on the end of beds and I ask people who are dying, I say, so what was the most meaningful, fulfilling things you did with your life? And I just listen. And listening, she said, is a form of love. And she called this dignity therapy because what she didn't like to see when people were near the end, she didn't like to see them second guessing themselves. Oh, I
Mm.
could have married a different person, or
Mm.
I could have followed a different path. She thought that was really the worst. So she tried to bring out people's most meaningful activities uh, and increase their inner peace. So she was great. And Sir John, you know, she said she'd retired, but not entirely. Sir John jumped up on the table and he said, Dame Cicely, don't you ever retire. Retirement kills. That's Sir John. Sir John was crazy. We really loved each other. And and so he started, I actually positive psychology started. Well, you talk about gratitude and all these
Hmm.
things. Um, Bob Emmons at UC Davis,
Hmm.
you may have interviewed him, started the Gratitude Center. But that all happened because in the year 1998, Marty Seligman, who was the founder of positive psychology, got together with Sir John at a restaurant on Market Street in Philadelphia. And Sir John had written this book called The Essential Worldwide Laws of Life. All these things about forgiveness, gratitude, kindness, they all got started because of Sir John. Humility, resilience, they're all values that he has in this book. And it's a beautiful thing to see. Um, Courage, sharing love, finding joy, pursuing your dreams, purpose. The whole Life on Purpose movement came out of this. And the Templeton Foundation was funding competitively grants on purpose that were very successful. So, and I was honored by Sir John. He asked me to write the foreword to this book.
Mm. Wonderful.
So I did that. And he got together because I knew he wanted a good scientist. He wanted to take this out of the world of folk literature, Aesop's fables, proverbs. He wanted it to have some scientific depth. And Marty Seligman, who was at Penn, but at that time was still studying learned helplessness in dogs. He was the president of the American Psychological Association. And Marty was tired of studying learned helplessness. So he wanted to go positive, and that was a match made in heaven. So
Hmm.
the two of them got together at the Marriott Hotel, historically, and had lunch. And Sir John knew he had his scientist, and Marty knew he had his philanthropist.
Hmm.
And then a year and a half later, in the summer, was the first kickoff meeting of positive psychology. And that changed the world. I was honored to be there, but there were a lot of people who were there, probably 10 or 12 people. And the topics were all condensed into what's kind of the Bible, if you will, of positive psychology, which is called Character Strengths and Virtues,
Mm.
a handbook and classification, edited by Chris Peterson and Marty Seligman. And it's great. Creativity. The thing I say about deeply forgetful people is they can be very creative,
Mm.
very creative. They can dance, they can sing, they can draw. Um, Curiosity, love of learning, wisdom, integrity, awe. So all the stuff that Doc Keltner is doing at Berkeley,
Mm.
at their Center for the Common Good, that was all originally funded by the Templeton Foundation. This is now 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I was on the board at the time, and Keltner put in a grant to study awe and wonder, and nobody knew what to do with it. So I actually reviewed it. I thought it was great. And that by the way, one of the chapters in this new book, may you cherish the gift of nature,
Mm.
because that's so important to freeing people from all the anxieties of everyday life. Go out to the woods. I ride the ferry across Long Island Sound from time to time to Bridgeport. I don't get off from Bridgeport. It's a little dangerous, but then I just ride back, and just cools me down and I feel more in touch with my inner being. So nature is really important. Gratitude, hope, humor. I have a wheel of love in this book. So once I define love, I have a wheel of love. It includes mirth
Mm.
because, I mean, at UCLA, they have a center. It's called the Cousins Center. Norman Cousins, who was the editor of the New York Review of Books forever and ever and very famous. He got an autoimmune disease and couldn't do much with it. Nobody could really help him. And he just got the idea that, I think I can laugh myself back to health. And he listened to old reruns of Candid Camera,
Mhm.
that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And he laughed and he got better. And it was de-stressing for him.
Yeah.
And so with the money that he got from his best-selling book, The Anatomy of an Illness, he started this center in California. And they still turn out the best work anywhere on mirth, laughter. And one of the things I worry about in our culture is that people have forgotten how to laugh.
Mhm.
It really bothers me. I mean, in a different era, I mean, I've always believed in laughter and tasteful, non-derisive, uplifting little jokes. Like, what do you do if you're an agnostic, you have insomnia and dyslexia? That's my question for you, Shauna.
What do you do if you're agnostic? Uh,
Dyslexia and insomnia.
Look at the stars.
No,
Walk
close.
outside.
All right, that's pretty good. The answer is you're up all night
Uh-huh.
wondering about the existence of dog. I didn't expect you to get that.
Very
But
good.
but you
Oh,
see the
I'm
thing,
my household is full of dyslexics, so that is not lost on me.
okay, good for you. Okay. So the point is that laughter, and this has been studied book, many articles have been done. Laughter reorients people
Mm,
very quickly in life. So if they're despondent, struggling with perspective, a little bit of laughter puts them in a much better place.
mm,
And so I'm known around this medical school and this hospital as the guy who does a lot of tasteful dad jokes. Well, that's not quite a dad joke. It's a little more complicated, but and I
Smart
talk.
dad jokes. How about
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Tasteful, smart dad jokes.
yeah. That's it. Yeah, absolutely. And the
There's your
students
title.
students like it, and so I talk about mirth in here, and there's the laughing Buddha, and Dostoevsky's The Idiot is a sort of comical portrayal of Jesus.
Mm,
So, and Jesus knew how to laugh.
mhm,
So the fact that we've forgotten how to laugh and gotten so serious, they're downloading so much nastiness upon us. We need to recover laughter
mm.
and mirth.
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
so these are all now in this book.
Okay. Thank
You
you.
know, it's a great book because every one of those topics we did a. I wrote the chapter on kindness. There's a section on previous science, which there often isn't much. There are only 6 articles in published medical and psychological literature on forgiveness in 2000. Now there are probably 500. There's a whole journal called The Psychology of Forgiveness, and people get tenured in psychology departments on forgiveness. And you read articles in the American Journal of Public Health about how forgiveness frees people from rumination,
Mm,
and rumination is a cause of hostility and bitterness and stress. So it's all connected. And this is the fact that now there's more science being done on resilience,
mm.
scientifically post-traumatic growth, resilience than on post-traumatic uh, uh, PTSD,
Yeah,
post-traumatic
post-traumatic
stress.
stress disorder.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I just blanked on that.
That's all right.
So every once in a while you'll see an article that talks about some new group, like we do a lot of studies on the um, the rescuers from 9/11 because we have a big dedicated clinic that works with them. And so I think that's interesting, but I'm not really very excited about it anymore. I'm much more interested in learning more about post-traumatic growth. What is it that makes some people resilient, more so than others? And what are the tricks to a more resilient life? And that's what positive psychology is. So I'm ready now to just kind of chuck disease-based psychology. Not that it's unimportant, but I'm much more interested in what our answers are.
Mm,
And the answers don't necessarily have to come from a bottle of pills at
mhm,
CVS.
mhm,
Um, but those answers can also come from being in nature, from um, practicing kindness, from, so the book is shaped like a mantra. May you give and glow. May you heal with kindness. May you follow your callings. It sounds like your son is doing that.
mhm.
May you
Well,
follow.
that's an amazing way to end this. I so appreciate your
Yeah,
time
yeah,
today. It just
yes.
so many beautiful topics, and I'm so glad that there are people like you in this world that are bringing them to light and sharing them and educating us and inspiring us. And I really just appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks, Shauna. I got a little long-winded, but that's excusable.
Yeah. Yeah, you had a lot to say. So I'm just
Good
glad that
luck.
we were able to connect because I think that this article, this interview will be very, very helpful and inspiring for people.
Say hello to Santa Barbara for me.
Thank you
I
so much.
I remember the bus station in downtown Santa Barbara.